Roger, what are you doing to that car?
Fuck them, because I am in love with my car.
Welcome back to PLD Projects Presents Crown Jewels. I am your host, PLD, and this is the podcast where I take you on a journey through Queen track by track. We go through the entire discography of the band as well as the solo projects, and we determine which version of every song is the best version of that song, or the crown jewel version of that song, if you will. We also rate the song from 1 to 11 because we always turn it up to 11 here on PLD Projects. And this week's song is a banger, folks. It is a real rockin' track. I'm in love with my car. This might be one of the most well-known non-hit tracks, if you will. And we got a lot of different versions to take into account when we're trying to determine which one is the crown jewel version. We actually obviously have the album version from A Night at the Opera. We have the single version, or B-side version, really, the 1991 Hollywood remix by Mike Shipley. We got the Queen Rocks compilation mix, the 2011 guitar and vocal mix. We got a bunch of different live versions to take into consideration. Live Killers, live at Hammersmith 1979, Queen Rock Montreal, the official bootleg from Astoria in 1990, The Cross and Brian May. We got a lot of Queen and Paul Rogers versions, Return of the Champions, Europe live downloads from Barcelona and Newcastle in 2005, Super Live in Japan, live in Ukraine, Cosmos Rocks Tour downloads, Mercia and Paris from 2008, and of course, Roger's Outsider Tour live from 2021, the most recent tour Roger has done. We even got a live at Glasgow 1979, which I'm including more for humor's sake, but we'll get there. We'll definitely get there. If you look below in the description, you'll see YouTube links to all these tracks. Those are there for your enjoyment. And when you get to them in the podcast, you can pause this podcast, click on that link, listen to the track, and then come back and rejoin the journey and see what I have to say about it. It's a lot of fun. We got a lot of tracks to get into. So without further ado, let's go right into it. Well, there we have Roger Taylor's I'm in Love with My Car, the official album version from A Night at the Opera. Initially taken as a joke by Brian when he first heard the demo. You can see that some of that in the Bohemian Rhapsody film. They really kind of put that song through the ringer. Luckily, I think Raj has enough of a sense of humor about it now. It's played in a kind of strange time signature for a pop rock song, more of a 6/8 time, which is really more of a waltz than anything you really get to hear in pop rock very often. The revving sounds that you hear are actually from Roger's actual car at the time, which was an Alfa Romero. It was played live till 1981 with Queen. They kind of put it to bed for a little bit. Roger brought it back when he toured with The Cross, one of the only Queen songs he'd actually play with The Cross for quite a while. Roger would actually be on guitar and fronting the band at that point, not on drums. He did bring it back for his own solo tours during the 1994, 95, and then again in 1998 and 1999. It was brought back for all of the Queen and Paul Roger gigs, or most of them rather. And he has played it for a good portion of the Queen and Adam Lambert tours. He had to bring it back right away for the Adam Lambert era, but he has played it quite a few times throughout their touring schedule for the last 10 years now. Time is flying. Time really is flying. Almost 11 years at this point. If you have heard it more recently than 1975, one other place you might have heard it, because it was used for a commercial for Jaguar in the mid 2000s. It actually was so popular that it led Hollywood Records actually adding it to a re-release of Greatest Hits, as it became a really cult popular song. Now, as part of what you might not have seen is the Bohemian Rhapsody comedic section, it did create a little bit of a controversy with the band. Roger became pretty adamant that he wanted it released as the B-side to Bohemian Rhapsody, and he fought for it, and he fought for it. And eventually, the other band members did give in. When Bohemian Rhapsody suddenly exploded and sold millions of copies, Roger was getting writing royalty credits, of course, for being the B-side. And that did not sit very well with Brian at that point, but they did soldier on, just working together, so it's not the end of the line for them. A few quotes, especially on that. Roger saying from 1982 in the Detroit Free Press, "I wish it would have been a single at its time. Of course, I made just as much money on it as the backside of Bohemian Rhapsody, so I probably made more money that way. Roger also had a quote from Pop on the Line in November of 1997. I remember my car at the time because I think we got the exhaust on the record. That was a little Alfa Romero. But I think it was more about people in general. For instance, boy racers. In particular, we had a sound guy or a roadie at the time called Jonathan Harris who was in love with his car, and that inspired that. I think he had a TR4, a Triumph TR4. That was from 1997. And then another Brian May quote, which I don't know where this one came from. I read it on his site, I believe, at one point. He did say, "We always wrote about money. A lot of terrible injustices would take place over songwriting. The major one is B-sides, like Bohemian Rhapsody sells 1 million, and Roger gets the same writing royalties as Freddie because he did I'm in Love with My Car." There's contention about that for years. Well, actually, no. So now we get to the song aspect of itself. I love this song. I think Roger's growl really fits this one perfectly. His vocal is like perfectly suited for it. In fact, I think Freddie's will be a little bit off comparatively speaking. Got that shuffle. It just keeps you grooving. It keeps you ahead of it the whole time. It boom, boom, boom. And it's like it kind of just keeps you going through. The lyrics, of course, are ridiculous in the very best way possible. I really love the harmony vocals that they throw behind Roger. Unfortunately, I feel like do almost get buried at times a little bit, comparatively speaking, but they are very nice and very flowy and very angelic at times. One of my favorite parts about the song is that bridge, though. It really gets groove and dun, 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 dun. Roger really starts to soar that high. I told my girl I'd have to forget her, have to buy me a new carburetor. What a great line. How can you not love that line? That's such a great line. Uh, but that's it. That's it for the album version. Let's move on. We're gonna listen to two versions now. I'm gonna have you listen to both the single version and the Queen Rocks compilation version because they are kind of similar. They do very small things. They're not altogether terribly different from the album version. So take a pause, listen to the single version, then the Queen Rocks version, and we'll come back and listen for more. And there you have it. See, not much difference really. All the single version does. The single version, by the way, it is, I mean, it wasn't released as a single. It was a B-side to Bohemian Rhapsody. But what they did for whatever reason is the beginning of the track now starts with those engine revving sound effects that end the album version. And then instead of that, they just kind of fade out at the end. But that's it. The rest of the version is pretty much the same. So I don't know if the effect is better or not. I could see some people liking to get into it with the sound effects, like get the sound revving and then you get into the song. I think I might prefer just having that at the end. I don't know. I'll have to see. I have to listen to it again. Queen Rocks mix. Now, Queen Rocks was a compilation they released in the late 90s. Basically, it was supposed to be Queen Rocks Volume 1. They never did make a Volume 2. It was released in 1997. And a couple of different versions of songs, different like remixes and things. It was basically the home for No One But You, Only the Good Die Young, which we'll get to eventually. The final, as it were, Queen song with Brian, Roger, and John paying tribute to Freddie Mercury with that track. But they did a little bit of a different version of I'm in Love with My Car here as well. And it basically was the album version with the added sound effects from the beginning, like the single. So it begins like the single and it ends like the album. So it's basically a lot more revving effects in the overall version here. But again, not much else to dive into. Otherwise, the album is the same as the album track, basically. All right, well, let's move on then to the next mix. We're going to go on to the 1991 Hollywood Remaster remix by Mike Shipley. You can find that in the description below. I'll come back and we will talk about it. And there you have it, the Mike Shipley remix from the 1991 Hollywood Remaster of A Night at the Opera. It was a bonus track. This was kind of a cool version. Instead of starting off like the album version or the single version with any revving, it starts off with the chorus, that choral ooh-ah is going with the I'm in love with my car, the stuff that kind of got buried a little bit in my estimation in the album version and the other single versions, etc. It kind of goes into it, then you have the engine come in and it comes into the normal drum piano intro. We got this chorus also that it's used at the end, and the ending is much more definitive. Again, the guitar and engine outro goes in there as well. Pretty much a similar throughout. I kind of feel like there's a little bit more phasing going on with the vocals at times. I don't know if that's just my ears or if it was just kind of the way it just was remastered a little bit. Overall, not a whole lot of different, but it's a good remix because it does a little bit different, but not anything drastically different. So sometimes remixes can go really awry by taking a song like and ripping it apart, and it's not even really the song anymore. This is still the song, but some definitely different ideas to be applied to it. So that is where we'll end that one. And we'll move on to the next one. Another bonus track, this time from 2011. When 2011, the Island remasters, they released a double CD of all the albums, well, more of a CD and a 5 or 6 track bonus EP. And one of the things they did there was they played with the levels and they played with different sound versions. And in this case, they do a 2011 called the Guitar and Vocal Mix, which is basically the track stripped down to basically guitars and vocals. So it's very interesting. It's down in the, again, as always, it's down in the description. Click on that, come back, and we'll talk about it. And there you have it, the 2011 guitar and vocals mix. It is exactly what it says it is. It's from the original multi-track, but it just features the guitars and features Rodgers on vocals. It's very, again, it's not something I would put. I'm going to spoiler alert here. I'm not going to put this as a crown jewel. It's not the best version of the track. It's an incomplete version of the track. But I do love getting to hear these. When you strip away some of the elements, you get to hear specific things you wouldn't get to hear generally speaking. And the guitar work is much more intricate than you would think it was at some points. And the vocals, you get those phase vocals that come through a little more clearly. It's just nice to hear them on their own, even if it's a mixed and matched. It's not even quite a karaoke version. It's not just an a cappella version. Just hearing the mix of the guitar and the vocals without the drums, without the bass, it makes for a very interesting alternative to the album version and alternative to any other version we're going to listen to. It's very unique in that fashion. I enjoy listening to it. It's not something I would put as my crown jewel. Alrighty, we're going to get into the live versions now, and there are quite a few. So I'm going to group a few of them together to kind of save time, and some of them are very similar. They're from similar times. For example, Live Killers and the 1979 from Hammersmith Odeon. From back-to-back years, back-to-back tours. We'll listen to them both and we'll talk about them at the same time instead of breaking them down individually, so to speak. We'll go on to do Rock Montreal on its own. We'll do the Cross one on its own, very different. We'll do the 2005 era for Queen and Paul Rodgers all in one shot. The Queen and Paul Rodgers from 2008, and then we'll do the Roger Taylor one and go from there. So without further ado, Live Killers and then the 1979 Hammersmith one, and then come back and we'll talk about it. There you have it, 1979's Live at Hammersmith Odeon, as well as the Live Killers version. Very energetic performances. I will notate that they are from a medley. They are the end of a medley, and they are shortened versions because of that. They play the song straight through until we get to about the bridge. After the bridge, they kind of jam out to the end instead of doing the last lyrical bits. Very good performances. Really, the similar performances. The big difference is really in the mix of the sound. Live Killers is notoriously for being a little bit muddy. Hammersmith is a very chaotic, very buzzy mix. It's not a very polished mix, but it's very in your face. And I kind of like that better, to be honest with you. I kind of feel like that energy is right there. I feel like I'm at the concert with them. I might be sitting on the stage with them. Both have a great background from Freddie. Freddie got a couple of ad lib oh yeahs in there, which actually make the song a little better in my eyes. But it's hard to put this as a crown jewel because, again, it's a medley version. It's a shortened version. If I'm looking for the best version of the song, I want the whole song. But I digress. Let's continue. Let's move on to the next one from a few years later, Live in Montreal in 1981. Come back for more. And there is from Queen Rock Montreal. Again, it's a very similar version to the ones we just heard. I do remember I did forget to mention where obviously Live Killers came from the album Live Killers. The Hammersmith one was released live at Hammersmith 1979, was released as a bonus video when Queen released Absolute Greatest. It was a greatest hits compilation where they try to pick between the greatest hits 1 and greatest hits 2, make one complete thing, and then had some iTunes videos that they released as bonuses, and that was one of them. This is from Queen Rock Montreal, and I gotta say I love this album. I think this album is probably the definitive live album that Queen has put out so far. Live at Wembley has like a lot of it is a little more famous, probably because of the venue and when it took place. Live Killers was the first. This is the best preserved, the best sounding. I love this mix very, very much so. The only thing that's lacking is that the audience is a little low key in the mix. You don't hear them as much. So you don't quite have that same energy as you feel, but the band themselves sound tight. Again, Freddie throwing some ad libs in there. Roger's in top form. He's got his voice going on. He's rocking it. I love this video as well. It's a great one to watch. They're obviously all enjoying themselves. This one's definitely top notch. We go from that to a very different version now. This is a very different version. This is from Roger Taylor's side band, The Cross, in the late '80s when Freddie Mercury was sick, got sick, and was no longer touring with Queen. Roger decided to form a new band to kind of fill the void of touring. They did some albums. He put together this band called The Cross. They had a couple albums, they did a couple of tours. This particular gig was a fan club gig, especially for the fan club, and it was released as an official bootleg to the fan club only. So it's technically an official release, kinda. But Brian May did show up for this version, and so it's The Cross and Brian May doing "I'm in Love with My Car." You know what to do. Click on that description and come back. And there it is, the Cross version with Brian May, taken at the Astoria Theatre in London in 1990, a fan club Christmas party. It's one thing for sure. They do the whole song, so that's a good thing. I don't really know necessarily who plays what officially. I mean, I know Spike is on keyboards. Peter doing the cross bassist is on bass. Now, because of Brian guessing, I don't know if they shifted things around. There's a chance Roger could have stepped back and gone onto the kit for this. Brian was there to play guitar, obviously. That was the other definitive answer. But it doesn't sound like him. So I think it's cross drummer Josh McCrae on the kit. I do think Clayton Moore is there playing his regular guitar part, and Brian playing his additional guitar part. And while Roger used to sing and play guitar for the Cross, I kind of feel like he probably just didn't bother with the guitar with the two already on stage. So Roger, I'm going to guess, just sang this song up front while everybody else did the thing. It starts off a little sloppy, but that's forgivable. Like this is a fan club Christmas party. They're not exactly set to tour on it. They're not practicing on it. They're just kind of like having fun with it, right? Brian definitely takes that to the next level. He tries a few things here and there, bends a note this way and that, especially at the jam session towards the end. Things he wouldn't try necessarily, which are fun versions of it. The one big difference is Roger does not go for it at the bridge vocally. He definitely does not go for those high notes like he used to. He starts taking them down a bit. It's still pretty effective, not quite as effective as the high, really roaring, told my girl had to get up there kind of thing. But hey, I can't do it, so I can't complain that he's not doing it as well. It's a good version. It's a good fun version. It's sloppy. I don't think it necessarily holds up to the Queen versions really, but it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to. It's still a fun alternative version. All right. Let's get into the Queen and Paul Rodgers versions now. A bunch of those, we're going to take this into the two eras, the 2005, 2006 era, and then the 2008 era. So we're going to listen to 4 different versions down there. The Return of the Champions, Barcelona 2005, Newcastle 2005, and Super Live in Japan. And then we'll come back and talk about those all in one big chunk. And then we'll go on to the 2008 era. But first, those 4 I just mentioned, go take a listen to them, and then come back and we'll talk about it. There you go. Those are all 4 versions from the 2005 tour, the Barcelona 2005, Newcastle 2005, Sheffield 2005, which is from Return of the Champions, and Super Live in Japan, which was recorded in October of 2005. Return of the Champions was a double live album released by Queen and Paul Rodgers. Super Live in Japan was released as a video in Japan only. The other 2 were part of a program that Queen had done online. They were releasing a few tracks per concert. Like every concert, they'd release 1 or 2 tracks from online. So those were where those downloads came from. They're very good. It's much better going from the Cross to that. This is a full Queen version again, even if Freddie is no longer with us and John had retired. Paul is not involved. Obviously, Paul Rodgers sings from the band for most of the tour, most of the concert, but this is a time where Roger gets to shine. It's Roger on drums and vocals, Brian on guitar, and it's the rest of the band, Spike Edney on keyboards. Of course, At this point, it is Danny Miranda on bass. That's right. And Jamie Moses actually plays an extra guitar for Brian. The Queen and Paul Rodgers tour, Jamie Moses played guitar to back up Brian, which let Brian do a little more playful things while Jamie held down the bottom end. Roger's getting a little older at this point. Definitely, you can hear the voice. It's not quite as strong as it was back in the 70s, of course, or even some of the early 80s. He doesn't go for those high notes. He kind of sticks it, plays it a little bit safe. We got some background vocals that do help fill in those gaps here. The band itself is pretty tight. The band can play. The band can absolutely play, and they really rock it out. They play the whole song. This is not a medley version anymore. This is a full on version with Roger really jamming out at the end. The drums are on fire. Brian plays some playfulness throughout. If I had to rank these specifically, if I'm gonna I probably would keep them all together in grouping as far as the overall crown jewel goes. I think I ranked the Return of the Champions one best. That was when they were. I mean, Roger just plays for the. He knew this was going to be the live album, so he went for it. Then Newcastle, then Super Live in Japan, then Barcelona. Barcelona might have been a little bit of a mix issue for me. Newcastle wasn't greatly mixed either. I'm not going to lie. I feel like they didn't really do a whole lot as far as mixing goes with the online, just the downloads. They kind of just threw it out there, which is fine. That's fine. I'd actually have them than not. Super Live in Japan, they're definitely towards the end of the 2005 tour, so they're jamming pretty well. But yeah, I think the Return of the Champions is probably the best one out of the bunch for me. All right, let's move on to the 2008 version. Got a couple of them. Live in Ukraine was the album that they released from this tour, and they had a couple of those 2008 downloads, Mercia 2008 and Paris 2008. So those three, and come back, we'll see if there's any difference between the 2005 era, Queen and Paul Rodgers, and the 2008 era, Queen and Paul Rodgers. Well, there you go. 2008, a few years on from 2005. Still similar to the version they did along the way in 2005. Not much is different. Roger's a few years older. The Ukraine performance in particular is probably one of my least favorites. Roger just seems really tired at that point. I don't know, he was just having a rough night. It was the beginning of the tour. He hadn't got his tour legs underneath him yet. I think the other two from the tour show the band in good health and good energy. So overall, it's still nothing much different from no changes. Mixes are pretty solid. The band has been together now for a couple of years. They know what they're doing. They have an energetic performance. It's the whole song again, like 2005. Really, not a whole lot has changed. If you've heard one version from this, you've heard them all. Really, I mean, there's not exactly a whole lot of difference here and there. It's fun. It's energetic. I'm sure in the concert experience, it'd be different. But as a record goes, on recordings go, it's fine. It's good. But it's nothing special. Nothing to get too excited about. And I love the band though. I love seeing Roger do this live. When I've seen them live when he was with Queen and Adam Lambert, it's fun to see him do it in concert. So that's the important thing. All right, let's move on. The one that's a very different to a degree. I mean, I shouldn't say it's that different, honestly, but it's the most recent version we have. Queen and Adam Lambert haven't put out much official releases, and not one of them had "I'm in Love with My Car" in it. But Roger did a tour himself, surprising everybody. He did a tour of the UK in 2021. And one of those stops, and throughout the whole tour, he played "I'm in Love with My Car" with a band that was pretty much Queen and Adam Lambert's band, which is obviously it's Roger on vocals, sometimes drums. He did have Spike Edney, of course, is a keyboard player that's been with Queen and Brian and Roger since 1984. Neil Fairclough, who plays bass and does backing vocals, he is actually with Queen and Adam Lambert. Tyler Warren, who plays drums and does backing vocals, added percussion. He really helped Roger through the Adam Lambert era. Him and actually Rufus Taylor, who started the Queen and Adam Lambert era before he left to join the Darkness and other things like that. They got Tyler Warren from Queen Extravaganza, the official Queen tribute band that Roger had handpicked. Tyler got called up to the big leagues a little bit. Also had Tina Keys, a keyboardist, guitarist, violinist, vocals, multi-instrumentalist, and Christian Mendoza is the guitarist. Brian doesn't go on Roger's solo tours. He did join him on one date for a jam session, which was kind of fun. But this band. It ended up being a very tight band, and let's take a listen to that one, The Outsider Tour 2021. And there you have it, Roger Taylor, The Outsider Tour live. The album was released in 2022, a very recent release. The gigs were from October of 2021, this one specifically in Guildford on October 19th, 2021. This is a lot of fun. Roger actually seems more energetic now than he did during the 2008 tour, honestly. And I don't know if it's Tyler Warren giving him a little bit of assistance, but something about this band really kind of feels tight. It feels energetic. It feels like it just knows what it's doing. Roger does not go for the high vocals during the bridge section like he hasn't since the 70s, but Tyler does, while Roger sings a lower version. So it's great extra harmony, which is different from anything we've seen before, honestly. It's a wonderfully loose version. I feel like they don't have to put on airs. This is not like a Queen performance. Roger's having fun with the fans, and it just feels fun. I love how it opens up, little dialogue with the fans, like taking the piss out of Bohemian Rhapsody, calling it Bohemian Raspberry, the movie Bohemian Raspberry, or they they say, fuck them for calling my track a piece of shit or whatever. It's a lot of fun though. It's definitely the Roger at his best. I really do like this one. I really do. So, well, there we have it. We have now reached the time. We have listened to all the different tracks. Which ones are the crown jewels? Let us rank them in order. At least this is my opinion. You might have a different one. The bottom of the barrel for me in this particular case, it's the Live in Astoria, the Cross and Brian May. Obviously, it's a fan club party. Like I said, it's the sloppiest version. It's the Cross doesn't compare to a lot of the Queen actual Queen band that they put together. The production's a lot different. It's not a bad version, but comparatively, it's the one I'd least like to put as a crown jewel version. From there, we got pretty much all of the Queen and Paul Rogers stuff, which is surprising to me a little bit in hindsight because the Queen versions, Queen never really did a full version of when during the Freddie era. It was always part of a medley. And generally speaking, when it comes to Crown Jewels, I'm going to want to hear the full version of the track, like I've said before. And in Queen and Paul Rogers, they do the full version of the track. Luckily, the medley version from Queen, though, it's kind of like they just go up to the bridge, the important part, and they jam out without playing a little bit of it. So it's not like it cuts a whole lot off. And I prefer Rogers' like stronger voice from the 70s. It's not a big deal. It just is what it is. Listening out there, Ukraine 2008, where he seems at his most tired, Mercer 2008, Paris 2008, Barcelona 2005, Super Live in Japan, Newcastle 2005, and then Return of the Champions, which is my favorite of the Queen and Paul Rogers versions that have been officially released. From there, Live Killers. Again, that's partially because of the mix. I really think that's the mix of, if anything else, because Rock Montreal and Hammersmith 1979, which are the next two, are both similar performances for me. Very good performances. Better mix, though, than the Live Killers is. From there, get up there. Queen Rocks mix. I like the mix, but it's kind of like it's a little bit redundant having the engines at the beginning and the ending. It's kind of like I don't know why what you're doing. Like I like the idea of moving it from the beginning to the ending is a different kind of way to have things go. I don't need it playing both times though, so it's fine. It's good, but comparatively, I'd rather have the single version more. From there, I mean, I guess I should point out that the Queen Rocks is up there above the live version at this point. I do generally speaking, prefer the studio version because there's a lot of going on. I love those back vocals; are so dynamic, and it's the full version of the track as well. So it's kind of like it's better than the live versions from the Queen era, better than the Queen and Paul Rogers era because Queen and Paul Rogers era, Rogers is not at his best comparatively, at least for this song. But that's all I have to say there. Above the Queen Rock versions, where I have the single version, I like the single version again, but all it does is really take the engine from the end and move it to the beginning. Okay, but I prefer it to begin it the way the album does. So there we go. We got four left. Four left. After all that I've said, we still have four left to do. Next up, the 2011 guitar and vocals mix. Again, it's a very cool version. I do love it. And the fact that it's this high is kind of impressive to me. It almost feels like it should be lower because as far as a crown jewel goes, it's just the guitar, just the voice, and it misses out on the drums, right? But I do find myself strangely drawn back to it for some reason. I can't really explain why. Maybe it's because I can hear Roger's voice so distinctly and that growl in there. Maybe I can hear the guitar work going on. I don't know what it is necessarily about it, but I do put that pretty high. Just above that, a live version, the Outsider tour. I don't know if it's relevant. I don't recency bias, but I really do enjoy this version. I like Roger and Tyler together, and the band just seems like they're having a lot of fun. It has a lot of energy. That's why it's this high. But it's not my crown jewel. If you've paid attention now, we've had two tracks remaining. We have two tracks remaining that I haven't listed yet. Is it the album version or is it the 1991 Hollywood remix version? Very rare, I will tell you, that the 1991 Hollywood bonus tracks would ever be considered a crown jewel, because usually the remixes were not the greatest. They were dance remixes. They were forgettable. They were offensive at times, but not this one. In fact, I actually prefer it a little bit to the album mix. It has a little bit more of the atmospheric intro. It has using the chorus and to hear that choir by itself for a moment before it then breaks into the rest of the song, which is so similar to the album mix. So at the end of the day, it's like the album mix plus a little something extra bonus for me. So that's why album mix is second, and the 1991 Hollywood remix from Mike Shipley is my crown jewel of I'm in Love with My Car. And now it's time to rate the song on a scale of 1 to 11, because we always turn it up to 11 here on PLD Projects. I'm going to give this one an 8.5. I love this song. I think it's a lot of fun, energy. I love Roger's voice. I love the shuffling 6/8 pattern. It's a kind of a deceptively simple song. It sounds simple in a way, but actually has some complexities to it. It's what you want out of a good rock and roll track. What you have compared to like some of the Brian May and Freddie epics. This is much more that kind of straightforward headbanging stuff that the Mike Myers character Bohemian Rhapsody really likes. I like it too. Bohemian Rhapsody is a better track, but you got to have this as a nice, it's like cleansing the palate, so to speak, right? But what do you think? That's what I want to know. And if this is your first time here, please click that like, click that subscribe. Let me know what you think about this series I'm doing. Let me know what you think about I'm in Love with My Car as we start moving forward. I really am enjoying doing this series, and I hope you guys are too. If you want to join me on my other channel, PLD Projects Prime, just PLD Projects, really. That's where I do all my movie content. I do all my music type content here on the PLD Projects Crown Jewels Network. Of course, if you're listening on audio, you have no idea what I'm talking about because it's all one audio feed. If you do like to support my projects and my networks, patreon.com/PLD projects is a great way to do it. If you can do it, obviously, not everybody can, but I really appreciate when you can, because it just helps me out, help me keep the lights on. I want to shout out specifically Austin Cadell, Jeremiah Morris, Matthew Kearns, Brandon Buckingham, Jeff Alterman, John Lastrina. I couldn't do it without you guys, and quite a few others. Great Facebook chat, got some extra content going there. This is a lot of fun we have. I'm not going to lie. But that's it for this week, folks. That's it. Next up, we have a John Deacon tune. John Deacon tune and a hit single for the band, You're My Best Friend. But that's next time, folks. Until next time, keep yourself alive. Keep on rocking. Take care, everybody.